Joining humans in war changed my life forever. The first thing Darrow noticed was the smell. It hit the moment the transport hatch opened, smoke, metal, something burned and wet underneath it all. Darrow had read about Dravik 7 in 17 council briefing files. None of them had mentioned the smell. None of them had mentioned that the sky would be the color of a dying fire, or that the ground would crunch under every step like it was already broken before anyone touched it. Darrow stepped out slowly, data tablet already raised, already recording. The transport had landed on what used to be a loading platform outside a collapsed processing plant. Half the roof had caved in. The walls were marked with blast burns so deep they looked like the building had been trying to swallow fire and failed. In every direction there was more of the same, ruin stacked on ruin, like the planet itself had given up. And moving through all of it like it was perfectly normal were the humans. There were 11 of them waiting at the base of the ramp. They were not standing at attention. They were not arranged in a formal welcome line the way a Velshani unit would have been. Some were sitting on broken chunks of wall. One was eating something from a small silver pack. Two were talking quietly and laughing about something Darrow could not hear. Their armor was olive green, scratched and repatched so many times that the original color only showed in small islands between the repairs. They carried their weapons loosely, comfortably, the way someone carries a tool they have used so many times they no longer think about it. Darrow wrote, "Human unit, casual posture in active war zone. Unclear if this reflects poor discipline or extreme familiarity with danger. Investigating." The one who walked forward first was a woman. Medium height, dark skin, short natural hair pressed flat by the helmet she carried under one arm. Her armor had more patches than any of the others. Her eyes moved over Darrow the way a person looks at weather, nodding it, measuring it, deciding what it means. "You're the council observer," she said, "not a question." "I am," Darrow said. "My designation is." "Darrow, yeah, we got the file." She shifted the helmet to her other arm. "I'm Sergeant Nadia Osei. This is my unit. We're your escort to forward camp." She paused. "You eat. We've got about 6 kilometers of broken ground between here and there, and it helps to have something in you." Darrow did not eat human food. Darrow noted the offer and declined politely, and followed when Nadia turned and started walking without waiting for anything more. The 6 kilometers took 2 hours. It was not distance that slowed them. It was the ground. Every road had been shelled into rubble. Every path through buildings required climbing over or squeezing through or going around. Twice the unit stopped completely and went quiet without any signal Darrow could see, just a stillness that moved through them like a wave, everyone freezing at once, eyes up, weapons half raised. Both times nothing came. Both times they moved again without a word. Darrow walked near the middle of the group and watched everything and wrote constantly. The young one was named Yusuf. He was the smallest of them and walked near the back and had a habit of scanning rooftops with a focused, rapid movement of his eyes that looked almost mechanical. He noticed Darrow watching him at one point and smiled, wide and easy, like they were passing each other in a corridor somewhere safe and ordinary. Darrow did not smile back. Darrow wrote, "Youngest unit member, displays unusual calm, may be poor at threat assessment or exceptionally good at managing fear response." They were 40 minutes from camp when the shooting started. It came from the left, 3 or 4 weapons firing from inside a collapsed building, energy bolts punching through the air and kicking up dust and rubble in short bursts. The unit reacted before Darrow had processed the sound. They scattered low and fast, moving to cover with a speed that was almost difficult to follow, and Nadia's voice was already cutting through the noise, short words, directions, names, and the unit was answering her with movement rather than words. Darrow pressed against a wall and did not move, and held the data tablet against their chest and watched. It lasted less than 4 minutes. The firing stopped. 2 of the humans had pushed around the side of the building, and the shooters, iron-fold scouts, 2 of them had pulled back rather than be surrounded. Nadia stood up from behind a shattered support column, looked around, counted her people with her eyes and said one word. Yusuf. And that was when Darrow saw it. Yusuf had not made it to cover cleanly. He was down in an open stretch of ground between two ruined walls, one leg pulled awkwardly under him, dust around him still settling. He was moving, conscious, but not fast enough. The area was not fully clear. Nadia did not hesitate. She did not assess or calculate. She simply ran back across the open ground, low and fast, energy still crackling somewhere in the distance, and she got her arm under Yusuf's and pulled him up and half-carried him the rest of the way to the wall. It was not a tactically sound decision. There were two others closer to Yusuf who could have gone. Nadia was the unit's sergeant and the most valuable person to keep safe. None of that seemed to register. She got him behind the wall and checked his leg, and said something quiet to him, and he nodded and said something back, and she actually laughed. A short, sharp sound. Almost angry but real. Darrow stared. That night in the forward camp, Darrow sent the first report back to Rail. Humans operate with almost no visible tactical logic at the individual level, Darrow wrote. The sergeant risked the mission's most critical asset herself to retrieve one wounded soldier. No strategic gain, no order given, pure instinct. Rail replied quickly, "Interesting, what do you think it means?" Darrow looked at the tablet for a long time before answering. "I don't know yet." The rain on Dravik 7 did not fall straight down. It came sideways, driven by winds that moved through the ruins like something alive and irritated. It was not water, not exactly. It was thin and slightly acidic, the result of decades of industrial runoff evaporating into a sky that had never fully recovered. It left gray streaks on everything it touched. The humans called it ghost rain. They did not seem to mind it. Darrow minded it very much but said nothing. Forward camp was built inside what had been a large vehicle depot, a long, low structure of reinforced concrete with 3 of its 4 walls still standing, and a roof that held except for 2 long cracks that let the ghost rain in at angles. The humans had dealt with this by moving their sleeping areas and filling the gaps with layered sheeting and strips of patching foam. It was not elegant. It worked. Darrow had been given a corner space between a support column and a storage rack. A cot had been set up there with 2 blankets folded on top. Nobody had been asked to do this. It had simply appeared. Darrow was not sure who to thank and so thanked no one and recorded it instead. The attack came on the 3rd night. There was no warning system. The iron fold had learned to move under the frequency ranges the Council's sensors used. The first signal was a sound, a low, building vibration in the concrete floor that Darrow felt before hearing, followed immediately by the first explosion somewhere on the depot's east side. Darrow sat up. Around the camp, 3 types of responses happened at the same moment. The logistics crews, a mix of Velshani and Keth workers, dropped flat and pulled whatever cover was nearest, staying down, staying still. The Turvek fighter, Groth, came off his cot with both hands already reaching for his weapon, moving before he was fully upright. And the humans were already gone, already moving toward the sound before Darrow had processed what was happening. Toward it, not away. Darrow stood, pressed against the support column, and watched. Nadia's voice was in the dark somewhere, calling names and positions in short bursts. Answers came back from different parts of the depot, from outside, from the roof where 2 of the unit had apparently been on watch. There was no central light. The humans were moving in near darkness and still finding each other, still coordinating, as if they could track each other by something other than sight. Darrow's species navigated by mild infrared. It helped, but the humans had no such advantage and they were moving faster. A second explosion hit the depot's south wall. Concrete dust rained down. One of the long cracks in the roof widened and the ghost rain came through harder. Darrow moved along the column, keeping it at their back. Tablet still recording, even though the footage was mostly darkness and sound. The iron fold came in through the east wall breach, 8 of them, in segmented black armor with red visors, moving in a tight push formation. They expected resistance. They expected a scramble, a defensive line, confusion. What they got was Nadia coming around the corner of a vehicle frame from the left, 2 of her unit coming from the right, and Groth simply walking into the breach from the front like a door being opened. The fight was short and loud and extremely close range. Darrow could not fully follow it. What Darrow could see, in the flashes of weapons fire and the red glow of iron fold visors, were the faces of the humans in the moments between movements. They were afraid. This was not a guess or an interpretation. It was visible and clear. Yusuf's hands shook between shots. One of the others, a tall woman named Petra, breathed in short, audible bursts. Nadia's jaw was tight, her eyes slightly too wide. Every single one of them was frightened. It was written on their bodies the way text is written on a page. And not one of them stopped moving. The iron fold pulled back through the breach. 2 of them did not make it out. Groth's heavy footsteps moved through the dark toward the gap and stopped there, standing watch, while the humans began checking each other, hands on shoulders, quick questions, names called out and answered. Darrow stepped away from the column. Yusuf was sitting on the floor of the depot with his back against the vehicle frame, breathing slowly and deliberately. His hands were still shaking. He saw Darrow looking and held up the shaking hand and looked at it almost with curiosity, like it belonged to someone else. "Happens every time," he said, not ashamed, just explaining. Darrow crouched down, an unusual posture for a Velshani, more human than their own body was used to. "You were afraid," Darrow said. "All of you." Yusuf nodded. "Yeah." "Then why do you?" "Keep going," Yusuf lowered his hand. "What else would we do?" Darrow did not have an answer. Darrow was very aware of not having an answer. Nadia came around the vehicle frame a minute later. There was a cut along her left cheekbone, not deep, already clotting, and dust in her hair, and she sat down on the floor with the comfortable ease of someone settling into a chair after a long day. "All here," she said, mostly to herself. Then she looked at Darrow. "You good?" Darrow blinked. Nobody had asked that. "I was not in danger." "I know," Nadia said. "That wasn't what I asked." The ghost rain came through the crack in the roof and made a soft sound against the concrete. Somewhere outside, Groth was still standing at the breach. The camp slowly, quietly began to settle. Darrow sent no report that night. There was nothing in the Council's reporting format for what Darrow had just seen. No field for the way fear looked on a human face while they ran toward it anyway. No column for the shaking hands and the kept going and the first question, after a firefight being not a tactical check, but "Are you good?" Darrow sat in their corner and listened to the ghost rain and thought about Yusuf's hand. 2 soldiers died on the 4th day. Their names were Ren and Obasi. Darrow had not spoken to either of them at length. Ren had been the one eating from the silver pack when Darrow first arrived. Obasi had been one of the 2 talking and laughing. Darrow remembered both of them only as background figures, part of the unit's texture, details recorded and filed without weight. They died when a stretch of tunnel they were clearing collapsed under secondary detonation. It was fast. It was not dramatic. One moment they were in the tunnel, the next the ground folded and they were not anywhere anymore. Darrow recorded this with the standard notation for mission casualties and expected things to continue. They did not continue. The unit stopped, not because anyone ordered them to, not because the mission paused or the perimeter was unsecured. They stopped because stopping was apparently what humans did, and Darrow did not understand it at all. Captain Dia, who Darrow had spoken to only in formal briefings and who carried herself with a quietness that felt almost like stillness, gathered everyone in the large open section of the depot. She brought out 2 things, Ren's helmet and Obasi's helmet. She set them on a flat piece of broken wall, side by side, and then she simply stood there with her head bowed. One by one, the others came and stood with her. Groth came last, moving slowly, his enormous frame somehow less solid-looking than usual. He stood at the edge of the group and did not bow his head the same way the humans did. His species had no such custom, but he did not leave, and he did not speak, and that was its own kind of language. Darrow stood at the far edge and watched and wrote nothing. Nadia spoke first. She talked about Ren, about a joke Ren had told every time they crossed an unstable structure, the same joke every time, and how everyone groaned at it every time, and how 2 days ago she had groaned at it, and now she would never hear it again, and she thought that was important to say. She said it without crying, but her voice had changed in texture, denser somehow, as if something inside it had weight. Then she talked about Obasi. She said he had 3 siblings and had been sending most of his pay home. She said he made the best cup of field coffee anyone in the unit had ever tasted, and had refused to share the method, and that was, she said, possibly a war crime. One of the others laughed, a short, surprised sound, then 2 more, not disrespectful, exactly the opposite, a sound of people recognizing someone, honoring them by remembering a specific true thing. Darrow had attended Velshani memorial protocols. They were formal, precise, structured around the contributions of the deceased to the collective record. Names were spoken. Roles were listed. The ceremony lasted a specific number of minutes. It was efficient and dignified, and when it was done, everyone knew exactly how to feel. This was nothing like that. This was longer, less ordered. Several people spoke who had not prepared what they would say. There were silences that no one rushed to fill. Yusuf sat on the floor and stared at his hands for a while. Petra talked about something small she would miss and then stopped mid-sentence and did not finish it, and that unfinished sentence stayed in the air, and no one tried to complete it for her. After a while, Darrow walked to where Groth was standing. The Turvak was difficult to read. Their facial structure did not shift the way humans did, and their emotional range expressed itself largely in posture and the position of the thick ridges above their eyes. Right now Groth's posture said something that Darrow tentatively translated as heavy. "Your people have a morning ritual?" Darrow asked quietly. Groth was still for a moment. "We mark death by fighting harder," he said. "We carry the names into the next battle." "And this?" Darrow looked toward the group. Groth's ridgelines shifted slowly. "Humans carry the person," he said. "Not just the name, the whole person." He paused. "I did not think that was possible. I think now that it is harder than fighting." Darrow turned that over and said nothing. Later, when the group had dispersed and the depot had returned to its operational noise, Nadia found Darrow by the storage rack and sat on a nearby crate and said nothing for a while first. Then she said, "I saw you watching." "I was recording," Darrow said, "for the council report." "Sure." Nadia picked up a small piece of broken concrete from the floor and turned it in her fingers. "Did you know either of them, Ren or Obasi?" "Not well." "That's okay." She set the piece of concrete down. "You didn't need to know them well, they were still people, that's the whole point." She looked at Darrow with the direct, measuring look she had used at the beginning, back at the transport pad. "What do your people do when someone dies?" Darrow explained the Velshani protocol. Concise, formal, contribution-centered. Nadia listened without interrupting. When Darrow finished, she nodded slowly, not dismissively, not judging. "That's not wrong," she said, "just different." "You grieve inefficiently," Darrow said. "Not an insult, an observation." Nadia smiled just slightly. "We grieve honestly," she said. "The efficiency comes after." Darrow opened the data tablet that night and sat with it for a long time. The report template was there, the standard fields, the formatted structure, the clean rows waiting for clean information. Darrow closed it. Instead, on a separate open file, Darrow began writing down what they remembered about Ren and Obasi. Small things. The silver pack. The laughing. Things that would never appear in any council document. It felt strange. It felt, in a way Darrow could not fully name, necessary. The mission briefing lasted 11 minutes. Captain Dia stood at the projection table with the map glowing between her and the unit, and explained what needed to happen in the same quiet, careful way she did everything. Like each word was load-bearing, and she had checked them all before using them. The Iron Fold had a communications relay buried inside a decommissioned ore processing plant 6 kilometers into their controlled territory. The relay was active. The Council fleet was moving into position and would arrive in less than 40 hours. If the relay was still running when they arrived, the Iron Fold would know their approach vectors before they did. The fleet would fly into a prepared ambush. Someone had to go in and destroy the relay. Dia finished the briefing and looked around the table and said, "Anyone who wants to sit this one out, say so now. No record, no judgment." Nobody spoke. Darrow, standing at the edge of the room, had already decided to stay behind. Observer status was clear on this. Darrow was not a combatant. Darrow had no tactical training. Going in would be a liability, not an asset. Nadia looked at Darrow across the table and said, "We could use someone who reads Velshani technical schematics. The relay is Council origin hardware. Iron Fold captured it. If something is modified or rerouted, you'd know what you were looking at faster than any of us." Darrow looked at the map, looked at the 6 kilometers of red. "I am an observer," Darrow said. "And you'd be observing a lot," Nadia said. Nobody laughed. It was not a joke. Darrow went. The 6 kilometers took 4 hours in the dark. They moved without lights, using Darrow's infrared and Groth's natural low-light vision as the unit's eyes at the front and rear. The humans used their helmet optics and moved with a loose, flowing spacing that kept them spread enough to avoid a single blast catching more than 2 at once. Darrow had read about this formation in military theory files. Watching it from inside was different. There was a geometry to it that felt almost like breath, like the unit was a single body expanding and contracting as the terrain demanded. The processing plant appeared as a black mass against a slightly less black sky. 3 stories of reinforced walls, smokestacks that no longer smoked, a perimeter of Iron Fold sentries moving in irregular patterns, irregular being the key feature, designed to prevent prediction. Nadia crouched in the dark beside Darrow and said nothing for nearly 3 minutes, just watching the patterns. Then she tapped 2 fingers on Darrow's arm and pointed in a sequence, here, then here, then here, and Darrow understood she was showing the gap, the window, the way in. They went in through a maintenance shaft that had been welded shut, and then unwelded by Groth's bare hands with a sound like slow thunder. Inside the plant the air was different, stale and metallic and warm from machinery that was still running somewhere deeper in. The relay was on the 2nd level, behind what had been the plant's central monitoring room. Darrow found it quickly. It was Council hardware, modified heavily, additional booster arrays bolted on with Iron Fold components, rerouted power channels, a secondary encryption layer added in their own coding language. Darrow could read all of it, could have taken it apart in minutes under normal circumstances. These were not normal circumstances. There was shooting on the ground floor. The Iron Fold patrol had found Petra near the maintenance shaft, and the unit was engaged below, the sounds of the fight rising through the building's bones. Darrow worked fast, hands moving through the relay's access panels, pulling connections, rerouting the booster arrays back on themselves, so the destruction would be internal rather than explosive, cleaner, less structural damage, less noise. Then the door behind Darrow opened. An Iron Fold soldier stepped in, not a patrol, probably someone pulling back from the fight downstairs, looking for a secondary exit. They saw Darrow. They raised their weapon. The next thing that happened was that Nadia came through the same door at speed, shoulder first, and hit the soldier hard enough to take them both into the wall. There was a short, violent exchange that lasted about 4 seconds. The soldier's weapon discharged once into the ceiling. Then Nadia had control of it and the soldier was on the floor and not moving. Nadia stood up slowly. There was a burn across her left forearm from the discharge. She looked at it once, looked at Darrow, looked at the relay. "How long?" "30 seconds, Darrow said. "Do it." 20 seconds in, 2 more iron fold came through the door. Darrow was inside the relay's core, both hands occupied, in a position that was entirely and completely vulnerable. The decision did not feel like a decision. It felt like the only thing that could happen. On the small equipment shelf beside the relay there was a compact energy tool, not a weapon, technically, a diagnostic instrument used to test power flows, but its output at maximum setting was enough. Darrow had known this from the moment they picked it up, had not thought about why they were nodding it. Darrow turned, raised it, fired twice. The instrument discharged with a sound like cracking ice and both soldiers stumbled back hard. Not lethal at that setting. Enough. Nadia had already moved on the first one. She finished it in 2 seconds. Darrow turned back to the relay and completed the sequence. The relay died with a sound like a long exhale. On the run out, nobody said anything. The unit moved fast and low and Darrow ran with them, not behind them, not beside them, but with them. And the distinction felt significant in a way that was hard to locate but impossible to ignore. Outside, in the dark, Groth fell into step next to Darrow and said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "You fought." "I used a diagnostic tool," Darrow said. Groth made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You fought," he said again. Darrow did not argue. The tool was still in Darrow's hand. Darrow had not put it down. The Council fleet arrived 31 hours after the relay went dark. Darrow watched them come in through a cracked viewport in the depot's upper level, a long line of ships moving in clean formation through Dravik 7's upper atmosphere, their hull lights catching in the orange cloud layer like something slow and luminous. From this angle, from this distance, the war looked like geometry, lines and formations and vectors. Down here it looked like Yusuf on a stretcher. The final push back to camp had not gone clean. It almost never did. 3 kilometers out from the processing plant, an iron-fold rapid response unit had picked up their trail, 4 fast-moving vehicles and more soldiers than the unit was set up to absorb in open ground. The fighting lasted about 20 minutes. Darrow could not reconstruct the full sequence after the fact. Memory had compressed it into fragments, Groth absorbing a blast that should have been Petra's. Nadia calling positions with her voice already hoarse. The smell of burned stone. A sound Darrow could not identify until later, when Darrow understood it had been Yusuf falling. He had been hit on the right side, below the armor plate, a fragment, not a direct shot but deep and fast bleeding. He had kept moving for 6 minutes after it happened. Had not said anything. Had not stopped. When he finally went down, it was not a dramatic fall. He simply sat down on the rubble like someone who had finished a long walk and needed a moment, and then he did not get back up on his own. By the time Darrow reached him, Nadia was already there, both hands pressing against the wound, with the particular combination of precision and desperation that Darrow had seen only in humans. The refusal to acknowledge that something might not be fixable. "I need a medical kit," she said, "not to anyone, to the air." Darrow had one. Darrow had been carrying it since the second day because it had seemed sensible, and Darrow had not thought about why until right now. The kit was Velshani spec, higher quality than the human field kits, broader range of coagulants, 2 types of tissue binders. Darrow opened it before Nadia finished the sentence. What followed was 40 minutes of moving through hostile ground with Yusuf on Groth's back. Groth carried him without discussion. He did not offer and no one asked. He simply came over, looked at Yusuf's condition, looked at Darrow's work on the wound, field sealed, stabilized but fragile, and crouched down and gathered Yusuf up the way someone picks up something precious and breakable. Then he stood and started walking and did not stop for the entire 40 minutes. Darrow walked beside him and monitored Yusuf's condition, and twice adjusted the wound seal when movement threatened to open it. Groth did not slow down when Darrow did this. He adjusted his posture slightly to give Darrow better access and kept going. Nobody told him to, he just knew. Nadia walked on Groth's other side. She did not talk much. At one point, somewhere around the second kilometer, she said to Yusuf, who was in and out of consciousness, "You better not die, you still owe me from that card game." Yusuf, eyes closed, said something too quiet to hear clearly. Nadia laughed once, sharp and brief, and then went back to watching the terrain. Darrow had run medical analysis for the Velshani Council for 3 years before being assigned to this observation post, had reviewed thousands of case files, had understood, in an abstract way, that organic life was fragile, that bodies failed, that damage accumulated, that sometimes the line between stable and not stable was surprisingly thin. Understanding it abstractly and crouching beside Yusuf Bello on the floor of the depot, while the unit's secondary medic worked and waiting, actually waiting, for a signal that said he was going to be all right, those were not the same thing. Captain Diaz sat against the wall nearby, not packing, not talking, not asking the medic questions, just there, present. Darrow had noticed this about Dia. She occupied space differently than the others. Denser somehow, like her weight was distributed with intent. She looked at Darrow once and gave a small nod that didn't mean everything was fine. It meant, "I see you here. You're not alone in this." Darrow did not know what to do with that, so Darrow nodded back. After an hour, the medic said Yusuf was stable. The word moved through the depot the way the earlier stillness had moved through the unit during patrol, like a wave, quiet and fast, each person receiving it and settling slightly, tension releasing from postures and faces. Groth, who had been standing with his arms crossed near the entrance, turned away and looked at the wall for a moment and then turned back. His ridge lines had softened. Yusuf woke up properly about 2 hours later. He looked at the ceiling, then at the medic, then sideways, and found Darrow sitting nearby with the data tablet closed on their knee. He stared at Darrow for a second. "You sealed the wound," he said, "not a question." "You were losing blood at an unsustainable rate," Darrow said. "In the field, while we were moving." "Yes." Yusuf was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You've been watching us for 2 weeks." "Yes." "Did you write it down, what you saw?" Darrow thought about the standard report format, the clinical fields, the efficiency columns. "Some of it," Darrow said, "not all of it." Yusuf nodded like that made sense. His eyes were tired but clear. "The parts that matter don't fit in reports," he said. "That's something we figured out a long time ago." Darrow looked at the closed tablet. That night, after the camp had gone quiet, Darrow opened the secondary file, the one that had started with Ren and Obasi, the one that held things that would never fit in a council report, and wrote for a long time. Wrote about Groth carrying Yusuf without being asked, about Nadia's hands always moving, always doing something useful, about the way 40 minutes of hostile ground could feel longer than a year, and also, somehow, like something Darrow would not give back. Rail had not been contacted in 2 days. When Darrow finally opened the channel, Rail asked immediately, "Are you all right?" Darrow looked at the question for a long moment. "Yes," Darrow said. "I think I am learning what that actually means." The orders came on a Tuesday. Darrow did not know the human numbing of days had started to register as meaningful until that moment. Until Darrow read the council reassignment notice, and the first thought was not the content of the notice, but the fact that it was Tuesday, which was the day the unit played a card game after evening check, which was a thing Darrow had started watching, and then started sitting near, and then, somehow, started being included in without anyone making a formal announcement about it. The notice said the observation assignment was complete. The relay had been destroyed, the fleet had arrived safely, the Iron Fold's position on Dravik 7 was collapsing. The Council required a full report. Darrow was to depart within 48 hours. Darrow read it 3 times. The final report took all night and most of the following day. Not because there was so much to write, because Darrow kept stopping. The standard template was there, waiting, patient, indifferent. Fields for tactical observations, columns for unit effectiveness ratings, a section for recommendations. Darrow filled none of it first. Instead, Darrow opened the secondary file, the real one, the one that had grown from a few lines about Ren and Obasi into something much longer, and read back through it. The card game. The ghost rain. Yusuf's shaking hands. Groth at the breach. Nadia's voice in the dark, short and specific and always calling someone by name. Then Darrow started the formal report, and wrote something the Council had not asked for. The report was not a tactical analysis. It was testimony. It described what Darrow had observed, not in terms of unit efficiency or combat effectiveness or strategic value, but in terms of what the humans were, what they did with their fear, how they carried each other, not as resources to be optimized, but as specific, irreplaceable individuals whose absence would leave a specific, irreplaceable shape in the group. How they built things out of terrible circumstances, humor and ritual and small kindnesses, not to ignore the terrible circumstances, but to keep living inside them. Darrow submitted it and sat back and waited for the response. It came from a senior council auditor within 6 hours. This document does not conform to standard observation format. Please resubmit using the attached template. Darrow wrote back, I am aware. The standard template cannot hold what I observed. I have included it as a supplementary document. Read it anyway. The second morning of the 48 hours was the last full day in camp. Darrow spent part of it sitting with Yusuf, who was moving slowly but moving. The medic had cleared him for light activity, which Yusuf was interpreting generously to include anything that did not require running. He was teaching Darrow a card game, a different one from the evening game, smaller and faster, something he said his grandmother had taught him. Darrow lost 4 times in a row. You're thinking too much, Yusuf said. It's not a logic game, it's a reading people game. I have been reading people, Darrow said, for 3 weeks. Yusuf smiled. Reading and understanding aren't the same thing. No, Darrow said, they are not. Groth found Darrow in the early evening, near the depot's remaining intact wall where the ghost rain had stopped and the air had gone briefly, unexpectedly still. He did not say anything for a while. He stood beside Darrow and they both looked at the flat gray sky and the ruins and the distant line of council ships beginning their landing sequences. Finally Groth said, My unit fought with humans twice before this. I thought they were undisciplined, loud, reckless. And now, Darrow said. Groth's ridgelines shifted slowly. Now I think I did not have a word for what they are, he said. I am still looking for it. I know the feeling, Darrow said. The departure was the next morning. There was no ceremony. Darrow had not expected one and would not have known what to do with one. What happened instead was simpler. The unit gathered near the transport pad in the gray morning, not in formation, just present. Captain Dia stood slightly apart and gave Darrow a nod that was more than a nod, the kind that carries weight and history and respect. Petra said, Come back, preferably not during a war. Someone Darrow had not talked to much, a quiet soldier named Ade, pressed a small packet of field rations into Darrow's hands and said, for the trip, which was medically unnecessary since Darrow did not eat human food, but Darrow took it. Yusuf hugged Darrow. Darrow had not been hugged in 15 years. The Velshani did not hug. Physical contact was formal and intentional and governed by social protocol. Yusuf simply stepped forward and wrapped both arms around Darrow's shoulders and squeezed once and let go, and Darrow stood very still through all of it, and afterward realized they had not pulled away. Then Nadia. She reached into her front chest pocket and took out something small and held it out on her palm. A coin, old, worn smooth, the image on its face barely visible. Human currency out of circulation, from a country Darrow recognized from historical files. "I've carried it for 6 years," Nadia said. "Doesn't do anything. Not magic, not lucky, not worth anything." She paused. "But it's been with me through the worst of it and I'm still here, so." She pressed it into Darrow's hand and closed Darrow's fingers around it. Darrow looked at the coin, looked at Nadia. "I don't have anything to give you," Darrow said. "You've been writing us down," Nadia said. "That's enough. Make sure they actually read it." Darrow boarded the transport, sat down, felt the ship lift. Through the small viewport the depot got smaller. Then the ruins got smaller. Then Dravik 7 became a surface, and then a planet, and then a sphere, and then a gray-orange point in a wide dark field. Darrow opened the secondary file. At the bottom of it, after everything else, after all the things that did not fit in council reports, Darrow wrote one more line. "They were afraid every time. They went anyway. Every single time they went anyway. I do not think I understood courage before this. I do not think I will ever see it the same way again." Then Darrow closed the file, held the worn coin in one hand, and watched the dark outside the viewport for a long time, thinking about nothing and everything at once. Which was, Darrow was beginning to understand, a very human way to travel.